Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 32. Today we will make those changes I talked about in the last video, which should ensure that the new waste processing center is operating at as best as possible. Well, not quite that well, since we will still need to use trucks to move the sorted garbage over to the incinerator, and there isn't much we can do about that. Except if we used forklifts, but that's a crutch I don't like to rely on, since it just adds more infrastructure, which can all be bypassed with a simple truck line. Anyways, I digress. We will also put some final touches on the town we've been building. We will finally give it power, plan out that new RCO capable of demolitions, and just doing last-minute additions to make sure it's ready for habitation. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. Let's begin with those changes I mentioned in the intro. Basically, we need to change the steel recycler's connection to the central sorting, and use a conveyor belt instead of a factory connection. I will forget to include a bus stop again, but there will be plenty of space left, so it's not a big deal, we can do it quickly later. We will need to move both the gravel, as well as the steel recycler to make this work, so that's what we started with. Since this will free up a factory connection on the sorter, we will also be able to hook the garbage train station up to it, so we might as well move that too. And since this made a lot of the rail tracks obsolete, I opted to delete them all, and start over from scratch on those. Same as before, we will just use a small aggregate loading station to move the gravel away. And this is the steel recycler. With the conveyor connection, we won't need to use a truck to move the metal scrap over. Of course it still needs a place to store the steel, and since only the big open storage has a train connection, that's what we went with. And with the newly freed up factory connection, we can add that train station directly hooked up to the central sorting facility. This will make importing garbage a much easier job in the long term. By the way, I did test this setup, and as I've said, it will work perfectly fine, and it will only require a couple waste trucks to move the burnable trash to the incinerator. Incidentally, I will add a second small dump to that building in a little bit, just to speed up the decay of the ash coming out of the building. But if we started importing waste from our neighbors, the rate of decay would be too slow, so I think we will not try to make some extra money that way. Also, the hazardous waste processing will also require chemicals, but we already have a warehouse set aside to store the recycled plastic, and it has a rail connection. I think we can safely sacrifice a little bit of space in it to bring in those chemicals, and just use a truck to move them into the processing building. I even like this rail setup more than the last one. The overall length of the platforms is much shorter, it is more space efficient. All that's left is to hook up the roads. I really wanted to keep everything on the same local road branch coming off the main highway, but with the addition of the rails, it will not be possible. I will try to make it work for a little bit, but then I will have to admit defeat, and just use multiple intersections. That's not gonna work. The intersections are simply too close together. Yeah, let's just use separate off-roads going to these buildings. I still tried to make the tracks be as close to the gravel station as possible though, just for the looks. This is the last road we need to place, and I really wanted it to be consistent with the turn radii of the other bends on the other ones, but the proximity with the rail tracks will prevent me from making it work. Give me a second while I try to put it together. I might have been able to make it work if I just moved the tracks. Oh well, it really isn't a big deal. I think the only thing missing is the bus station at this point. And I already know that there is enough space to squeeze one in, and we can make the necessary footpath connections go under some of the conveyor belts. So as I've said, it will be an easy and quick addition later on. Next, I started to take care of the garbage collection points around the new town, setting them up for sorting before the garbage makes it to the recycling place. And to be honest, I think it would make more sense to only worry about the dangerous stuff when it comes to this kind of sorting. Unfortunately, the AI governing the way waste trucks collect the garbage can be highly inefficient, and they sometimes allow these bin stands to overflow, even with a lot of idle trucks sitting in the technical services garage. In the future, I might do an experiment, and only make these stands separate out the hazardous and biological waste. Everything else can just go into the mixed rubbish, since it will all be separated in the central facility anyway. While I was talking, I also discovered that the old stand responsible for this area was not in range for all the apartment blocks, so I just added 2 more, which will take care of everyone. I think that's all of the bin stands taken care of, except the new ones we just placed. We will deal with those once they are done. Next on the agenda, a rail construction office capable of doing demolition jobs. In previous episodes, I did float the idea of using this middle island for this, and I think it's time to give that a try. Now, I can already tell you, this place is a bit too far away from the residential blocks, so we will either need to build at least one apartment block that is close enough, or build an ugly-looking footpath that literally cuts through the river diagonally, just to make the walking distance short enough for the citizens. I think I will just build an extra block along the river, but only time will tell. Time to place that RCO. It will need two auxiliary buildings. One will be the small open storage, like we had with the previous office, and a garbage transfer station, so we can store the scrap reclaimed during demolitions. And thanks to the way the factory connections are positioned, we will need to place this pretty much in the middle. Technically, we could use the bigger open storage, and use trains to keep it filled, but I really don't want to add too much freight traffic to this branch. It should be mainly used for passenger services. I only put the RCO here because it makes staffing easier. And this is the garbage transfer station. It's just a bunch of big containers. We will of course need to use trucks to make sure it's kept empty all the time. It has 2 parking spots, so giving a full load order to 2 garbage trucks should be enough to keep it from filling up. It's not like we do colossal rail demolition jobs all that often. Okay, I got a bit confused, and hooked up the wrong tracks. Let's just use the usual parallel setup, so I don't mix things up. Next, the roads. Should be easy enough. Since this place will see very little traffic, I don't think I will bother with those chain signaled level crossings here. I was about to place the power, but then I remembered from testing this setup, that it might be advisable to build a second technical services office. Since the garbage drop-off point is pretty far away from the town center, it won't hurt to give a bit of a wiggle room for our garbage trucks. Okay, with that done, we can start placing the power substations. This one will cover the RCO as well, but I do think it doesn't really use that much power with so few buildings around, so after placing the next one at the distribution sector, I also included a cable switch, so we can share a single power line to cover both locations. The bridges seem to interfere with the cables. We will need to go around them. Now we can place the rest of the substations to cover the town itself. That should take care of the lower city. And we still have a couple connections left unused on the transformer for the part on top of the hill. Anyways, we got a notification about unhappiness among the citizens. One of the tall blocks in front of the Palace of Communism is struggling for some reason. Well, maybe adding an autodrome will help lift the mood in the area a little bit. The fact that the block itself is being renovated tells me that the actual reason for the dip in morale was because of the deteriorating housing quality, but giving the people a bit of entertainment should help them forget about it the next time this happens. Seeing that bin holder at the second shop made me think it might be time to replace these old garbage trucks. They are slow, and don't hold all that much trash. We have much better alternatives nowadays, so let's do it. If I see a truck sitting idle, I just send it over to the scrapping facility, and buy new ones in their place. Obviously sending the ones out on a job in the city is not the best idea, so I wait until they return home to replace them. At this point, I just checked on the last two, and since they were empty, I sent them to be scrapped. We had enough new trucks to pick up the slack. That apartment tower also complained about sports. To help them out a little more, how about we also build a small football field? We have a nice empty plot of land next to the river. At this point, we might as well replace the 2 trucks with the big containers. They will not benefit from a capacity increase, but will most certainly do so from the increased speed. And the tower is now being renovated. The refurbished apartments, together with the new amenities, should help keep the people a bit happier. It will take a bit of time for the overall happiness to rise back to normal levels, but it's already increasing. Now the farming. We keep getting notifications about the lack of grain in the farm's main storage silo. So it seems the field we added recently were not enough. We need to do more to help the situation. But I didn't want to add any more fields on that side. The fields in the back are already pretty far from the main building. Thankfully, we have a lot of space on the other side of the main road. The only problem are the power poles. They are a pretty big obstruction to any kind of farming we might want to do close to the road, so we will need to make peace with a couple fields not being as big as they otherwise could be. Also, I really didn't want to have fields with wildly inconsistent shapes, so I used dirt footpaths to cut them down in places. They should hide nicely among the surrounding dirt textures. At this point, I think we can start placing fields in the more open areas. Okay. Let's see how far these fields will get us. We just need to hook them up to the rest of the roads, and we can move on. With the extra fields, we might as well buy 2 more extra farming machinery in both categories, and then fill the remaining parking spaces up with the delivery trucks. I also wanted to increase the fertilizer imports. Those 3 garbage trucks are simply not enough to keep the supply steady. We need a proper distribution office. Next to the depot should be fine. And happiness is already up to 60% in that tower. Things are definitely improving. While I wasn't looking, the tracks around the recycling center got finished, so it's time to electrify them. Same goes for the ones at the new RCO. Since we have a big looping branch going through the new city, the track layers should have a much easier time turning around now. And it's done. We can start placing the signals for the RCO. Wow, managed to electrify all that rail in one go. Got to love these modern track layers, they can do a lot more work than the smaller ones. And that fertilizer office is done. I don't think we will use the old trucks, they are pretty inefficient. We can just buy bigger and better ones instead, and scrap the old. Since the ones with the big containers already spent a lot of time loading at the border, I don't think it makes all that much difference which storage type truck we use, so I just bought the biggest one. Well, they are still taking a long time to load up, and that might interfere with the other vehicles trying to use the customs house. I really wish there were factory connections available at the border offices. It seems the recycling branch is fully electrified, and is ready to receive the signals. And the speed of the construction in that processing center was pretty fast, only a couple more buildings remained to be built. This tiny little island looks like a perfect place for some kind of a future monument. Although, building and maintaining things we build there would require a helicopter construction office. Just might be the excuse we need to build one. Before we say goodbye, I wanted to make one last change to this setup. I wanted to add a second small garbage dump to the incinerator, so we can use it to speed up the decay of the ash coming out. And I think this is where we will leave it for this one. At this point, I think the town is more or less ready to go. We just need to start bringing in the consumer goods, and set up the internal distribution. We already have all the buildings we need for that. We can use the rail offices for the imports, and there is a road office at the distribution center for the local stuff. The only problem is the size of the town. It will take quite a while to fill everything up completely, but hey, we could use that population boosting research for just such an occasion. If I don't forget to get it started as the first thing in the next episode, then we should have even more people ready for resettlement by the time the town is fully good to go. After we have people living in the area, we can at last move on to the steel. I know, I've been saying that a lot lately at the end of the episodes, but hopefully, this time will be for real. If we have a local workforce to build things with, then we have no more excuses, and we can get to work on the next stage at last. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.